organizing for all local climate organizers, for municipal light plants, for better buildings advocates. We've had a speaker series this past year, Paths to Climate Justice. We've had an array of programs this past year. Quite a few of them had to do with the Massachusetts Climate Bill, which finally happened at the end of the year. I'm going to remind folks if they would like to stay on after 1 o'clock today, we'll convert into an open network facilitated sharing among local activists. So here we are in Massachusetts.
I'm sorry, Fred, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, what happens is we're muting everyone, and it's hard to keep track of unmuting the person who's speaking. Okay, so I'm just going to make mention that I'm sure everyone here knows someone, a friend, a family member, an associate who is in LA. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge, and if you want to put something in the chat to the extent that you know someone in LA, any Angelino or Angelinos, I invite you to mention that connection in the chat. And if you go back to your group, your local organizing group, most of you are involved with local organizing in your town or municipality in Massachusetts, you might bring that up. I am sure everyone has, or most people have, a story of trauma. And that's what's going on right now. I think the trauma, I just want to say this, that I believe the trauma cannot yet be fully comprehended. It's being reported on. I have no particular complaint about the reporting. I'm just saying that the level and amount of trauma is massive, and I don't think we can comprehend it immediately. So I just want to say that we're thinking and caring about all our fellow Americans, all those in harm's way, and who are now climate refugees. All right, so wanted to get that out there. I do want to mention again, well, Phil got the recording started. We're going to ask for any questions to be held until after the initial presentation. So please don't be chatting in response to something that our speaker is saying until after the initial presentation is done. And last editorial, it's January 2025. That means we're in the second half of this decade when we must achieve a significant acceleration in decarbonization. So whatever else is happening, I implore all of you climate activists, let's keep that in mind. All right, so today's program, thank you so much to our fellow organizations who are co-sponsoring today. Much appreciated. And also we've gotten some feedback. I just want to mention some feedback that we went a little overboard on the publicity for today's program. So appreciate that feedback, and we'll take that into consideration as we do subsequent programs. Steve Nadel is our speaker today, and for 4 decades, his organization, ACEEE, has been at the forefront of securing and defending major progress in U.S. energy policy. It's my honor to introduce Steve. Steve and I worked together going way back to the 80s. It was my honor to work with Steve, and I just want to say that if you've had a chance to look at his bio or look into learning about ACEEE, I hope you will become more involved, keep track of what ACEEE is up to, and help support them. And I just want to say that Steve has for decades been leading federal progress in energy and climate. It's not just the organization, it's him, the individual. He's been the front line in advocacy, in lobbying Congress, and in promulgating regulation and in standing up uh, to the Trump 1.0 inanity. Um, so again, please hold your comments and chat until after the initial presentation. But for now, I'd like to turn it over to Steve. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Fred, for that kind introduction. Yes, I used to be a Massachusetts resident back in the 80s, and Fred and I, and perhaps a few other people on this Zoom, worked together then, and I continue to work with folks from the Bay State. Let me share my slides and dive in. Um, Give me a second. And hopefully this will go to full screen, right? There we go. Okay, I'm going to talk a bit about can we make climate progress under Trump? And my sense is yes, we can. That said, it'll be less progress than if it were Biden or Harris or someone else. But let me talk about what I think some of the things that we're going to have to deal with are, what some of the opportunities might be, and then I'm happy to have a discussion. And I'm sure a lot of you will have questions as well as comments. So, for those of you who do not know ACEEE, the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, we have 82 staff and about a $16 million budget. It's grown quite a bit since I joined ACEEE back in 1989 as staff person number 4. I see us as a trusted source of program and policy advice, whether it's federal, state, local. I, in general, will not be reading all the words on my slide, so I encourage you to take a look at them because I won't be reading every word. And we're particularly known for a lot of research that we do, looking at the state of the art in terms of programs, technologies, policies, what's working, what is not. And then we very much apply that in terms of technical assistance, policy advice, and even a little bit of lobbying. So we have made enormous progress on energy efficiency. ACEEE was formed in 1980 after both I'll call it the two 1970 oil crises, for those of you old enough to remember them. This slide shows how energy consumption since about 2000 has been about flat, even as the economy has grown enormously, as shown by the upper line. And energy productivity is one way to measure it, energy use per GDP. You could see that's increased substantially due to flat energy use while a growing economy. So energy efficiency was probably a majority of that. There's also a structural change, more service-oriented economy, less manufacturing. But this is a major improvement that we all can feel proud of in terms of improving energy efficiency. Now, we see energy efficiency as a cornerstone of decarbonization. This from a slide in 2019. We called it halfway there and found that energy efficiency across the different sectors could reduce carbon emissions by about 50%. Then we need, renewables, other low or no carbon energy sources to get the other half. But we see energy efficiency as a real foundation. It is generally the lowest cost source of decarbonization. Do that first, and then you can start doing other things. And by cutting the loads, we need smaller heat pumps, less power plants, smaller distribution lines, etc. So we see efficiency as critical to decarbonization. So with that as background, why don't I talk about Trump? And first, let's look at what happened in his first term. Was it good? No. Was it a disaster? We survived, and I think we will survive Trump too, but there will be challenges. During his first term, Trump did draw from the Paris Agreement, said we won't be no longer under it. Biden rejoined. I'm assuming Trump will again withdraw, and whoever is president after Trump hopefully will rejoin. But he did keep the DOE and EPA voluntary programs going. There was some thought about would he try to cancel Energy Star. There a few people suggested it, but it didn't go very far. Likewise, DOE does a lot of research and development on energy efficiency. He did keep that going. Don't use the climate label or decarbonization label. Already I'm hearing from friends at DOE, there's certain words that they're trying to strike from all their written materials, such as decarbonization. Coming up with other words. It's not like they're currently planning on not doing it, but they're just not going to use that word. Um, there was a tendency to do more longer term R&D, pre-commercial, and a bit less in terms of actual implementation. Appliance standards is one of the major DOE efficiency programs, and under Trump 1, only a few standards were promulgated, and those were only ones where the court ordered them. You must do this within a certain period of time. Anything that was not under court order for appliance standards, he didn't do. We're expecting the same next time. Almost nothing coming out on standards unless there's a court order. He did promulgate weak regulations on emissions and related topics. Some of those got thrown out in courts. Biden then reversed that, and for the most part, stronger rules have taken effect since Trump left and Biden renewed them. That said, it typically takes a couple of years to do a rulemaking. So Trump will probably try to cancel some rules. That will take him at least a year and then at least a year to do a new rule and quite possibly more. And another thing, while Trump didn't directly cause it, there was a significant increase in state and local action on climate as local activists, such as MCAN, said, we're going to make progress at the state level or the local level, despite whatever Trump is trying to do at the federal level. So, just very briefly, the Biden administration, I think, did embrace attacking the climate crisis. There was the bipartisan infrastructure bill, did a lot for EVs, low-income weatherization, and that got a fair amount of Republican support as well because it invested heavily into all sorts of transportation in particular. There's the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a major piece of green legislation with tax credits, incentives, R&D, lots of different things. The Chips and Sciences Bill to promote reshoring of chip manufacturing in the U.S. and encourage and aid it. There were major advancements in appliance standards, I think over 40 of them. Building codes got strengthened and significant funding to states and localities to advance that. Fuel economy standards increased significantly and lots of other things. I would note since the election, there's been a major effort to obligate the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA spending, so that they're under contract, and it will be very difficult for Trump and Congress to reprogram those. So, what do we expect from President Trump in 2025? He's likely going to withdraw again from the Paris Agreement. Hopefully, he leaves it at that and doesn't try to withdraw from the underlying Rio Agreement. There's some Republicans who want him to draw from Rio because that was ratified by the Senate. And the argument is, well, you can withdraw from Rio until the Senate ratifies Rio again, you can't rejoin Paris. That said, it's very unclear whether Trump could withdraw from a treaty or it's going to need an act of Congress. That's one of the things that may come up. But relatively quickly, withdraw from Paris. Wouldn't surprise me if he also tries to withdraw from Rio, and then we'll see what the courts have to say about that. In general, he and his some of his key aides have said we're going to be very aggressive in trying to do things, and we'll see if the courts let the lawsuits come challenging us. Last time he lost a lot of lawsuits. Hopefully, the same happens this time. Some other things, I think it's likely that he'll order federal staff to be in office. And while there are some impediments to this, they don't have enough office space, for example, and there are a lot of union agreements that allow people to telework. Ultimately, as he continues to do that, it probably will drive a number of departures. A lot of people who've gotten used to not coming into the office every day and no longer want to do that. And then he will work with Congress on what's called reconciliation bills, which will be the major legislative way that they will try to change existing law and cut funding for a lot of the climate things that we believe in. So, with that, let's talk about the Congress that took office about a week ago now. The Republicans control both the House and the Senate. In the House, they can only afford to lose two votes if all the Democrats hang together. And since there are over 220 of them, that will generally be the easiest way to defeat some of these initiatives. Find three Republicans who are willing to defend something. In the Senate, they can lose three votes, but not four. That will be a little tougher since there are relatively few swing votes in the Senate, but sometimes it will be possible. They will use what's called the budget reconciliation process to advance their agenda. Under budget reconciliation, you can pass a budget uh, and then enacting legislation to meet that budget with just a majority in the Senate. It cannot be filibustered. So that is the way they will probably try to do that. The Trump tax cuts in 2017, reconciliation. Obamacare, reconciliation. IRA, reconciliation. So there is a history of using reconciliation whenever one party or the other controls the presidency, the House, and the Senate. Now, reconciliation is only for budget-related matters. Every provision must be reviewed by the House or Senate parliamentarian for compliance with reconciliation rules. And these rules were originally developed by West Virginia senator named Robert Byrd. It's his picture in the upper right. And going through the parliamentarian and looking at the reconciliation rules is sometimes called a bird bath. So if you ever see that, they are going to try to carefully include things that will pass this bird bath. The Democrats, when they did IRA, for example, they got a lot of provisions included. They had to go back and revise some things to make it comply with the rules, but some things fell by the wayside. The parliamentarian says, no, that's not just budget. You're trying to change underlying law and not just affect the budget. There are ways to do some things that affect underlying law, but they have to affect the budget. For example, Trump opened up Anwar in his first term by saying, oh, we are going to get $1 billion of income by auctioning off leases in Anwar. The bottom line, they ultimately got $14 million worth of bids across two things. So they were wildly off in their estimates, and one hopes that the congressional score creepers will look at recent experience if they try to score things like that again. We're expecting Congress to do one or two reconciliation bills. The House wants to do one, the Senate wants to do two. My guess is they will have to do two. I don't see how they can get everybody to agree on absolutely everything without any Democratic votes. If they do two, the first one would probably be for immigration, some energy, maybe some defense. The second and much more complicated one will be to extend the Trump tax cuts and maybe do some other tax cuts and whatever else they can agree to. Uh, the first bill, if they just do immigration, energy, and defense, I'm hearing they're looking for on the order of $100 billion to build more border wall, build detention facilities, etc. Whereas to extend the Trump tax cuts will cost more than $4 trillion, and then additional tax cuts could make it five or more. One of the questions is some of the Republicans say we don't want any more deficit spending. I'm sure they could find 100 billion for a first bill, but that may create problems for extending the Trump tax cuts because even Elon Musk is only saying he's looking for 2 trillion, and they're going to need 5 trillion or so. So we will see. There is some discussion that they'll use some change the rules to say that well, extending existing tax cuts, we don't have to offset those. It wouldn't surprise me if they do that, but they are going to have to work with their budget hawks to not to minimize increases in the deficit. So it'll be interesting how that all works out. So what's at risk? Some of the green tax credits, I think, are at risk, particularly for EVs. From what we're hearing, Trump really wants to cut those. Elon Musk is willing to say sure, because he thinks Tesla will be in a better position without tax cuts than their competitors. Everybody will be hurt, but he thinks it will help them. Um, Hopefully, some of the other tax credits, such as the home retrofit credit, sometimes known as 25C, or the new homes credit known as 45L, will be retained because we only need a few Republican votes, but time will tell. But those are where some of the bigger potential savings are. Most of the IRA spending looks like the Biden administration will get that committed, but there will be a bunch that is not. For example, hydrogen spending. It would not surprise me if a lot of that gets quickly vacuumed up to pay for things like border wall and detention centers. They still need to do annual budgets, so there could be leaner federal budgets, although again, they can only afford to lose two House members, so not that much. And again, there are going to be some Republicans who won't support a budget unless it massively cuts the deficit. So there's a decent chance that appropriations will actually have to be bipartisan. The Republicans alone won't be able to agree on something. Um, Another thing we have to be careful of is, well, you can use reconciliation to avoid the filibuster for budget items. Anything else, they have 53 votes. If all the Republicans hang together, they have to get at least 7 Democratic votes. They might be able to do that in a few things, so we have to be very careful what those are and make sure that they're not too bad. Let some of those potential 7 Democrats know, gee, this is a problem. Can you get an amendment in exchange for your support? Things like that. We also see some opportunities for modest bipartisan progress. I say modest, it's more to, get people on record as supporting some good things and have a little bit more to build on. Industrial competitiveness may be one. It's a broad category, but there may be some things in terms of workforce training and helping to strengthen American manufacturers vis-a-vis foreign manufacturers. There may be some possibilities there. Their affordable housing. The election, a lot of it was about, the cost of living, and housing has become a particular tough thing to afford in many areas. There are a number of bipartisan bills to expand the low-income tax, the housing tax credit, the LIHTC credit, or to enact something more for middle income. I don't expect them to be spending billions of dollars, but maybe we can get a little something. And then in 2026, we're due to have a transportation bill. These come up every 5 years, and there may be more opportunities there. But in general, the Republican mantra is they're willing to do good things as long as they don't have to spend money and there are no mandates. So that will strictly limit things. With that, I mainly wanted to talk about federal, but since I'm talking to a bunch of state activists, we do see major opportunities to increase state as well as local activity, even though we won't get as much out of the federal government. Many of you may be familiar with the ACEEE State Energy Efficiency Scorecard for Massachusetts, and the last one was ranked second. We'll have another one coming out probably in March. I'll say you are high ranked, but I can't say exactly what yet. It's still getting finalized. Likewise, we do a utility scorecard. We did one in 2023, and you'll notice the number one and number two utilities were Eversource and National Grid. So you have something to be proud of there. National Grid was tied by PG&E out on the West Coast. We see a variety of opportunities here. Building performance standards, Boston, Cambridge, and very recently Newton enacted building performance standards, but why not statewide standards? Colorado, Washington, and Maryland have them. Why not Massachusetts? What's called clean heat standards. Colorado and Vermont have them. These are requirements for gas utilities and fuel oil and propane wholesalers to gradually ramp down the emissions of the fuel that they sell by promoting heat pumps, by selling lower carbon fuels, etc. Massachusetts and Maryland are both looking to develop these administratively, so to encourage them to continue doing that. Equipment emission standards. California, the Bay Area has already adopted them. The rest of California is working on them to basically limit emissions from things like furnaces and water heaters to be either zero or very low emissions. And NESCOM in the Northeast has model legislation. So hopefully Massachusetts and as well as some surrounding states can use that. Putting a price on carbon, raise the price of carbon emitting fuels. California, Washington have these. In the Northeast, there is the regional greenhouse gas initiatives just on electricity, not on fuels. New York passed legislation to establish carbon pricing, but now they're working on the details, and Governor Hochul is due to announce her proposal as part of her budget shortly. There's also polluters pay legislation, sometimes called the Climate Superfund, that Vermont and New York have enacted. Details still to be determined in terms of regulations. And I know MCAN is working on that for Massachusetts. The Zero Ready Energy Building Codes. Massachusetts has a stretch code and a specialized code. Many communities have adopted it, but if your local community hasn't, this is an opportunity. And I'd note residential time of sale energy disclosure. Massachusetts requires HERS ratings for new construction, but what about for existing homes when they are for sale? There are programs in places like Portland, Oregon, and the Twin Cities, as well as surrounding communities. Berkeley's another one. Just to give some examples, here are the places with building performance standards around the country. There are more than a dozen. Oh, I forgot, Oregon also has passed it. So we're 4 states. So Massachusetts could be number 5. Here's building code status by municipality. This is from the DOER website. So you could look at it there. Time of sale disclosure. Typically, this would be like a 1 to 10 rating. This is Portland. They give an example of a home that has a 3 rating. but then they make some recommendations on how to improve the rating. And this is required when you put a home on the market, and you have to include it in your listings. Here's the Minneapolis one. They use more of a sliding scale and 100. And there they talk about, well, here's two things you can do to get up to 100 on this particular home. And studies have shown that these help motivate buyers to look for more efficient homes, or if they're buying a less efficient home, know that they have to make some upgrades and that they do make upgrades often afterwards. So more broadly, opportunities for action. Ask friends and family who are represented by a moderate Republican representative to weigh in with their representative. Massachusetts is all Democratic representatives, no Republicans, so it's not your in-state representative. That's maybe some of your neighbors or where you grew up, friends and family. Advocate for state action, and I listed a number of them in previous slide, and they're listed again here. And likewise, advocate for local action. Again, some opportunities listed here. So the big picture, I would say there's been a lot of momentum to address climate change, federal, state, local, business, and consumers. I think the federal efforts will slow, but many of the other efforts will continue, and in many cases will increase. We will continue to address climate change, maybe not quite as much as we would need to. Meeting 2030 targets will be extremely difficult with Trump in the White House, but at least we can slow things down and hopefully position things so that a next administration can make up some lost ground. I think we can and should defend potentially winnable items, as well as make forward progress, whether it's the federal policies on industrial competitiveness and affordable housing, or the various state policies that I've mentioned before and list yet again. So with that, here's contact information, including information about ACEEE's website. Keep an eye on our website. You can subscribe to our newsletter and our email blasts, and you can pick the topics that you want to do so you don't get them all. So I'd encourage you to do that and keep up with our work, and as well as work on things like building performance standards and a time of sale home energy disclosure requirements. So with that, I'm happy to, I guess, stop sharing and take questions and comments.
So Fred, you're muted. Fred is still
Okay.
muted.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. All right. So thank you so much, Steve. Fantastic. I'll toss a softball, but I'm take my question later. My softball is, do you want to queue up any particular story from Trump 1.0 that might or might not be illustrative of what you think might happen in the next 4 years? Okay. While you're thinking about that, let's take Kimmy is got a hand up. So, folks, if you would please just go ahead and unmute yourself, Kimmy, if you can. But, folks, if you could raise your electronic hand, and you do that via, how do you do that, Phil?
By going down, mousing over reactions, and then select raise hand. And then when you're
Perfect.
finished speaking, lower your hand.
Terrific. Okay. So we'll take folks as they raise their digital hand. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's good to hear somebody be optimistic about what we can still do. And I think, yeah, I'm really excited about the local action that we can do in Massachusetts. And also to hear that Newton, like passing, regulations about buildings. So my question is kind of specific. I think I'd like to hear other people's like more general questions, but So in the mail, I recently got a document saying like, choose which energy you want, like through Eversource. And one of the options is like 100% renewable. So I noticed it was the most expensive, which is sad to see, but is that an effective way to shift us towards like a renewable energy economy in your eyes? And like, if so, like, should we be just telling everybody we know, like, hey, switch over to the, 100% renewable energy?
It definitely helps. It helps create a market for this renewable energy. I think everybody has to look at how much more it's going to cost them. There are a variety of providers that you might be able to choose from, not just the one, but look around who it is. Some, localities, some organizations help provide advice on those. But yes, it will help as long as it's affordable. If it's not affordable, donate to the climate group of your choice instead. Uh, um, but, so I wouldn't say it's always a great thing to do, but it often is.
Okay, I think Kimmy is probably referring to municipal aggregation. Uh,
Ah, okay, not individuals.
I hope that's what you're
No,
referring to.
she said there's an Eversource 100% renewable option. She has a choice. That sounded to me like individual.
Right. So we can clarify that when municipal aggregation happens, it's generally a very, very good thing. If it's individual choice, it can be highly problematic. And from there, we're off to the races for a whole different discussion.
Okay.
So thank you for the question and thanks for modeling succinct questions for Steve. This is great. Okay, and who is next with their digital hands up?
We've got Dennis from 350 Mass.
Hi, yes. So, yes, I've been with 350 Mass and Massachusetts Peace Action for years. And we did manage to get a municipal aggregation in Medford, Massachusetts, and also regulation that solar panels have to be put on any new buildings over 10 units. I think conversion of older buildings can be, especially individual homes, can be problematic, and I don't know that there's really the financing necessary. But I put something in the chat which I want people to take a look at, which is about energy consumption being flat. And I think someone advised me that that means it's electricity use, not the burning of fossil fuels, because what I've seen is that greenhouse emissions have actually increased with GDP, and that decoupling is more of a fantasy if we keep having, because GDP growth includes destructive practices like war and oil spills, and also the mining for the materials for batteries and solar panels is eventually going to hit a brick wall because there's only so much of that around. It pollutes the groundwater. And a lot of the things that we're saving here are being offset to other countries. Their pollution is being moved overseas. So I wanted to say that degrowing the greed and the destructive practices in the economy is the really only way that we're going to solve climate change. Thank you.
Okay. So the figures that I showed were all energy and not just electricity. So at least that's at the national level. But yes, it's if you're space heating, there's gradual switching away from oil, which is higher, perhaps to other fuels, but it's harder to switch away than it is with electricity as you move to renewables. That's a major improvement.
All right. Dennis, thanks for that. Who else has got a question? And is there anybody else with a raised hand, Phil?
Yes, there's Chris O'Keefe from Marlborough.
Hi, thanks very much for taking the question. So earlier we were talking about on the federal level, opportunities here and there to peel off a few Republican votes. And one of the things that we do, so I am involved with, it's a church ministry group. We have like a dozen members, but we have about 200 friends who we reach out to and say, write your rep. And what we've done before is saying, if you're from a red state, especially, contact your friends and neighbors from the red state to contact their reps. Can we target it more? Can we identify, that this senator or that congressman is amenable to this kind of pressure, so that I can say, hey, anybody in my community who's from Akron or knows anybody in Akron, write to this guy.
Right. Yes, there was a group of 18 Republican representatives who wrote a letter to the speaker last fall saying, as you're looking to cut the IRA, be surgical, don't just take a meat axe. There's some good things there. 14 of those got reelected. So that's probably where I would start. People who typically are in somewhat competitive districts or care about these issues. So those 14. I know I just saw a study today that identified the 10 representatives with the most green jobs. There's another list, but it's going to be a subset. It's not every Republican representative or every senator. There are some that are going to be easier to get and some that, probably don't try Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example.
So is somebody keeping a list, and are they sharing it?
There are various lists I can share after the call with Fred, the letter, which had that 14, that 18 people, 4 of whom didn't get reelected. And I can share them a link to that study that came out today as 2 lists. Depending on the issue, the targets will change slightly, but those are good places to start.
Steve, can I ask a follow-up? For with the 82 staff that ACEEE has, are some of those folks some of the time working on some of those Republicans?
Yes, we do have a few people who just focus on federal policy, and we're now pulling together the information that we need to defend key things. We're not actually doing the meetings yet. That said, we find in general, we try to get business allies to request the meetings. That tends to work better than just, hi, I'm from a small nonprofit group. Some people call us green. Will you please meet with us?
Fair enough. Okay, Mary.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. I hope you can hear me. My question is specific. It has to do with building performance standards and net zero zoning type ordinances and maybe potential legislation at a state level. And my question is, from my own experience as an affordable housing operator, as I've been reviewing, stuff that's similar to the City of Boston's net zero carbon zoning change that has been proposed. And you'd find that for like new construction projects, these are real projects that we work on, that to comply with such laws or standards, it adds an operating cost going forward that was not envisioned in the development of the affordable housing project. And if we have to buy RECs, so there's something there that was not originally envisioned. And as you know, affordable housing is not a right in this country. So those who develop affordable housing are in the business of making things happen in a very impossible environment. And my question is, how do you balance both the housing and the climate crisis, especially in a state like Massachusetts that has so many people who are on the housing waiting list and spent 5+ years on that list? So how do you balance that? Because on one end, we may have groups like ACEEE that say building performance standards are great, and I agree. Net zero zoning is great, I agree. But affordable housing is critical infrastructure. But when it comes to this type of laws and legislations and ordinances, it's not treated as critical infrastructure. So for example, in Boston, you'll have an exemption for hospitals, general manufacturing, and labs being allowed to sort of stagger their compliance period, but affordable housing not allowed the same opportunity, while it's housing many Black and brown households and people of really low incomes. How do we balance that?
Okay. No, they're both very important, and I don't want to sacrifice one at the expense of the other. To start with new construction, Massachusetts has been one of the leaders in passive house certified housing. And you can often do that at a pretty small extra cost because you're saving chimneys and central systems, etc. So build to passive house levels often make sense for affordable housing. How much renewables you can do will depend on your site. Do you have good solar access, or are you surrounded by tall buildings and you don't have? I would say do what you can. It will vary from site to site, but maybe don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, which is a highly efficient building that is affordable. I know one of the things we're doing some work on is some trade-off mechanisms so that if you use low carbon building materials, maybe you can use some of that to offset some of the renewable requirements for those cases where 100% renewables is challenging. So yes, let's get, at least 70% lower emissions, but site by site, we're going to have to determine whether 100% is truly doable or not. The other thing I would note is eventually the Massachusetts electric grid will be 100% renewable. So it's not a question of whether it will be renewable or not. It's a question of whether it's on site or whether you have to wait 5 or 10 years before you're sure all that electricity will be renewable. So it's a question of degree and timing rather than, oh, gee, we're committing to forever burn fossil fuels.
So I just want to point out that this discussion that Mary started and Steve, you responded to, is great. And Mary is one of the state leaders in this arena and also on the national level also, in addition. So let's see if we can get to Sarah and then is that Mike McAteer? In that order, please.
Hey everyone, this is Sarah from GBH News. How are you? I'm really glad you're holding this event. This is really interesting. One question I had was whether or not you're able to pinpoint like one policy or even a couple in President Trump's first 100 days that you can anticipate him repealing, specifically in regards to energy policy.
A lot of times he will have to go through an Administrative Procedure Act, and it will take longer than 100 days. But if I had to pick one that I wouldn't be surprised if he does, because I think he can do it administratively, is there was a ruling on the EV tax credit that if it's leased, it's subject to the commercial credit, not the residential. And that has been a way some companies that do not have a lot of US source components try to qualify their cars for the credit. I believe with the stroke of a pen, they can change that interpretation. It's not the only thing, but that's a concrete example.
All right. And do you want to follow up with the reporter after this? And Sarah, it's good to have you here, and everyone recognizes you as a great reporter. Thank you for being here.
I'm happy to follow up if Sarah wants
No.
to have further
I'm
discussion.
actually all set. We're filing in like 6 minutes, but thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, Mike. Is that Mike?
Yes, indeed. Can you hear me?
Hi,
Steve,
Mike.
how you doing? Listen, I
Good.
love your positive optimism. We need more of that. But my question is, do you have any insights within the DOE where they have, it's being led by Yegar Jigger, roughly $60 billion that they've targeted to the states for clean energy projects. Is it the sense that that is going to dry up, or is, from your insights inside the area, can we still count on that as a possibility?
Short answer, it's a possibility and we don't know, but let me elaborate a little bit. This is the Loan Program Office. This
Yeah.
is a program that goes back quite a few years, but the Inflation Reduction Act added quite a bit. They've been steadily rolling out different projects. They're trying to close quite a few loans before Inauguration Day, but there's going to be a whole bunch that they've tentatively agreed to, but there won't be contracts signed because there's lots of financial due diligence. They don't want another Solyndra where someone goes belly up, so they're being very careful. There will be money that is uncommitted. A lot of these are in red states, so hopefully the Trump administration will let them go. We don't know. Among other things, so far they've only announced the top two people at DOE, the secretary who's testifying, I believe, today before the Senate, and a deputy secretary, the number two, who just got nominated a few days ago. So we don't know who it's going to be. We don't know how much they will let these existing commitments that are not yet signed move forward. We are expecting them to try to broaden the definition to allow some fossil fuel projects in some ways, to not just use it for low emission projects, for other things. Whether that requires a change in law depends on the details. I don't think they're going to repeal the program outright. They like the fact that there's a bunch of money there that they can play with, but we will see what they do and what they target. And they may take some money away if they're trying to, free up money to, build a wall or what have you.
Great. The context of that, again, putting it in an optimistic mode, is that within Concord, Massachusetts, is we have already preliminary design for a district geothermal system for about six buildings, and we're at that point where we're looking for capital, right? And it's going to be required to find grants and subsidies to at least pick up part of that cost. So that's the context of whether or not there's any oasis at the DOE programming office. But thank you so much.
Right. The one thing I would say is they won't even consider a project unless it's at least $1 million, and they usually need to do more than that. There's an awful lot of financial due diligence that does require some expense to the applicant. And so this is not for small little project. You said it's 6 buildings. Maybe it's large enough. I'm just saying, beware that there's a significant cost to see this through.
Right. Well, the early cost estimates will fall into that 4 to 6 million arena. So I think we'll meet the capital side of it. It's just the fundraising side. But thank you.
It's worth contacting them, particularly between now and January 20th. See if there's any initial take on it, and go from there.
So,
excellent. Thanks.
So I'd like to pick up on that because we're coming up on 1 o'clock. And I just want to thank Steve again. And Steve, if you want to finish with any remarks, but here's my final question for you. As few people have characterized your perspective as optimistic. I would suggest it's realistic. It's up to you to what you think. And also, how would you suggest we're a few days, we're 4 years minus a few days here. So we got a 4-year slog ahead of us. How would you suggest people stay involved, stay aware, as things progress or regress?
Okay, so yes, I tend to be somewhat optimistic, but I think realistic. I'm not saying it's going to be a beautiful sunny day for the next 4 years. It's going to be cloudy, but the sky is not falling. I tend to break it into 2 years plus 2 years. They have opportunities to do reconciliation for the next 2 years. But with such a tight margin in the House of Representatives and the fact that almost always the president's parties lose seats in the House, means they may only have 2 years to do reconciliation, and then they may have to deal with the Democratic House. So that's the first 2 years. That's the most dangerous. But there's lots of things they can do administratively, particularly in years 3 and 4, because if a rulemaking takes 2 or 3 years, some of those things won't roll out until the second 2 years. So initial things to worry about, but then there's longer term over the 4 years to also worry about. Some things, the initial, it's legislative, the longer term is probably more administrative. Will there be setbacks? Unfortunately, yes. We and others will try to minimize those, but we won't eliminate them. But hopefully there's also a few opportunities for progress, a little teeny bit at the federal level, much more at the state and local level. And yeah, sign up for our mailing list and pick appropriate topics if you want to keep up on what we're doing and what's going on.
Thank you again, Steve, for being at the forefront for all these years and for keeping things going and keeping us looking in the right direction. Thank you so much, Steve.
Okay, certainly. And good luck. I have to run now for my next meeting, but I appreciate this. And Fred, I'll email you a couple of those links for people who wanted to know about specific representatives.
Terrific. I encourage everyone who would like to stay on for, we'll continue past 1 o'clock. And this will be, we'll convert to, or shift to an open discussion. And we're down to a smaller number of people, so that's probably more reasonable. So I'd like to start, if I could, there was a significant discussion there. Some of the things that were in the chat we didn't really get to, but if anybody would like to start out with, and by the way, if we could keep comments and or questions brief, that'd be terrific, so everybody can share. But if we could start with any federal thoughts, any thoughts about anything that was covered or not covered by Steve, anything that you'd like to. Here's a specific question I have: as you talk with your local group, what are you going to say or do about what's going to be happening in Washington? As you're talking to your local group, are you even going to be mentioning what's happening in Washington? That's my question. If anybody wants to chime in, or with any other and or with any other thoughts about the federal picture. And you could just take yourself off mute and speak. Oh, Kimmy, you raised your hand. Thank you so much. Go for it.
Well, I saw someone in the chat put, what is reconciliation? I would love if someone could answer that question because I'm a bit confused. I had my own question as well, but maybe we can just start with that one if that's possible.
Cool. Who wants to take a stab?
I think probably the one way to do it is just to do a Google search, and that'll give a rough scope.
Do you want to do that and then come back and report? Phil?
Sure. Yeah.
Hey, thank you, thank you. Everybody's cautious to give you the right answer.
Yeah, I Googled reconciliation and reconciliation was in the definition. So I was like, what? Um, but so my question was about, or like I guess my question or kind of topic was about the farm bill, which has been like in the House and Senate, I don't know, like I guess going back and forth for like many months. And you know, now that we're having a Republican, well, okay, so this is in the context that, you know, food emissions globally make up about a third of all greenhouse gas emissions, and a third of methane emissions come from animal agriculture specifically. And so there's a lot of potential to promote plant-based foods and transition to plant-based farming. And in general, like, you know, providing more access to plant-based food for people, that could be part of the farm bill. And I guess the topic is like, the question is, you know, how can we leverage the Republican representatives who might more be in farming communities to make sure that farming, what's in the farm bill is helping improve the sustainability of farming, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Right, and you know what? Our speaker is signed off. So good question, and I don't know that we're set up for anyone to be to provide the answer. And do you want to just say, as long as you're speaking, I see it says plant-based treaty. Can you tell us what that is in just a nutshell?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So Plant-Based Treaty is a global organization that's working to promote plant-based food, so that we can live safely on the earth in terms of climate change, but also in terms of deforestation and water use and things like that. And so we, our big program is our city program. So we work with cities to help create that bottom-up pressure. Cities can endorse the Plant-Based Treaty as well as individuals. So like people on this call could go to plantbasedtreaty.org and endorse the plant-based treaty. But I live in Boston, and so we're building a movement in Boston so that Boston could endorse the plant-based treaty and create policies within the city to make plant-based food more accessible. So for example, the neighboring towns, Cambridge and Somerville, have food programs where the city gives low-income residents who use SNAP benefits. They match the amount of money they spend on produce. So basically, low-income residents are more able to afford having fruits and vegetables in their diet. And so that's something that we could encourage the city to do. So yeah, that's kind of
You work.
really.
Last question, I could for the moment, if you don't mind. Do you work with BCAN, Boston Climate Action Network?
No, I came on this call because I'm just starting to develop these relationships. I'm like, yeah, I would love to as well. So
Great. So I'm going to put in my chat my email if you want to grab it.
thank you so much.
I'll connect you with your local climate action group.
Thank you.
And Kimmy, I posted a link to the definition of reconciliation into the chat.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
So it's the Republicans might use the reconciliation to push through their policy goals. It's a tool, a special process that makes legislation easier to pass in the Senate. And I guess maybe there's a different thing in the House, but that link will give you a good start, Timmy.
I think Steve was thank you for that, Phil. I think Steve was emphasizing that a reconciliation bill will avoid filibuster. So it doesn't need 60 votes. It can get by with only 50, but it has to comply with strict rules, including it has to be budget only. And that's what he was talking about. The parliamentarian has to scrutinize every aspect of it. So thanks for that discussion. Who would like to speak up about anything else federally or anything else that's on your mind? I appreciated that that folks put some thoughts, mentions into the chat about friends and relatives in LA. And again, my question to any of you is, as you meet locally, how will you approach the fires in LA? Do you see it as related to our work locally or not? Anybody want to speak up there? Brucey, you just okay.
Yes, so what I'd like to say is that those fires in Los Angeles are affecting everybody in California who's lived through wildfires recently. My sister and extended family in Sonoma County lived through the Tubbs fire and made a pretty harrowing escape. And I've been talking to her just recently, and she said every time there's a high wind and with severe fire conditions, her anxiety goes through the roof. So all of the people who've been, I'm starting to repeat myself, but I think that we all need to realize that if we know anybody in California who's been through or near one of those fires, they're all feeling something right now. And that I think it's a powerful message that we can share with people about the essential work that we're trying to do to decarbonize, or whatever we're going to use in place of that word for the next 4 years.
I'm not avoiding the word. Okay, Deborah, I'm sorry, you had your hand up. I might have missed it. Sorry about that.
No, you didn't. I've just been talking to my brother, who's also an architect in Scotland, but he asked me if California was likely going to change their building code because the houses that did not burn were uncombustible. So I was wondering if that might have a effect everywhere, like in Massachusetts, where we have, I live in the woods, if we have a wildfire, all our houses go too. So I thought that was an interesting viewpoint from abroad.
Well, that's very interesting. So yes, I heard yesterday someone, I think it was speculative at that moment, but they were saying likely the largest natural disaster ever in the nation. So we're thinking of it as a local event. It's at least national, if not international, in my mind. Okay. Thank you for that, Deborah. So, build back better. Is that what we're talking about? And build back without wood? And if so, is that low embodied carbon concrete? What would you recommend, Deborah?
There are insulations that are non-combustible, such as rock wool, as opposed to foam. That may be where we start. I think it's very difficult to know where to go right immediately. But I mean, the first building code ever came in was because of Fire of London, where they started having party walls, uncombustible party walls between buildings that went up 2 feet higher than, so the fire couldn't, or was less likely to leap over. So it has always changed building code. And the UK architects are now required to do extra hours of fire issues to do with fire because of the horrific fire on the Tower Block in London that killed 80 people. So fire does change. Fire on this scale will change things. I just don't know where it's. I think we're all too new to this to come up with solutions right immediately. But it'll be interesting to see what fire chiefs' input will be. Because at the end of the day, it's firefighters. I mean, what they've been doing is just unbelievable in California.
Right. And as I keep saying, and then Brucey, you alluded to it, anxiety levels, I'm calling it trauma. Trauma takes a long, long time. I mean, we're talking on one level, we're talking about building, like actual structures. Humans, we take a long, long time to deal with trauma. I don't even want to say, heal from trauma. All right. And Haley, was that you, Haley? Do you want to say something?
No, I just chatted that I think it's not only the firefighters, but I think the insurance industry will have a major impact on future building codes in fire-prone areas and other climate-exposed areas. That's all I had to say. Thank you for what you're doing here.
And it's not just the insurance company, it's the reinsurance companies, which carry a lot more weight. You know, who insures the insurance companies?
Judith, you want to speak up?
Oh, just that trying to replace the way we live now seems like an absurd option. That we need to think about how we're using resources, and humans are the greatest invasive on the planet. So how can we not duplicate with better, better buildings, but how can we change the way we live? How can we live in a more condensed way? Allow nature to do what it needs to do, put us in very urban areas with very good options. So a bigger picture, I think, is needed than just rebuilding or reduplicating.
Well, Michelle, you want to speak up, please?
Just a minute. Yeah, no, I was just saying that it's not just fire, though that's a devastating consequence of climate change, but winds are higher than they've ever been. And there are ways to build to resist wind damage, and floods where I live are now a problem when they were very, very infrequent before, causing a lot of damage both to homes and to agriculture.
All right. Well, I'm open to any further discussion. I was going to say on that cheery note. So I just want to remind us that, mention of trauma, all the work we're involved with is traumatic. And many of us have been at this for some time, and to carry trauma is difficult. And to deal with, when I give talks to groups of people who are not necessarily highly engaged like you all are, I always say, listen, I don't necessarily wish upon you that you learn a lot about climate. I just want you to do the following 3 things. Bing, bang, bang. Done. Because if you learn a lot about climate, you will go through depression, and depression can be tough. So with that, I'm not trying to close off discussion. I just want to say that us climate activists, in a way, we're not inured, but we've been facing catastrophe as we think about it. And hopefully we can be a little bit more helpful, therefore a little bit helpful towards those who are recently traumatized. It's a thought. Brucey, please.
Yes, I just wanted to say I was really interested what Deborah Bentley was saying about the fire codes and her brother's question. I read that Los Angeles, or perhaps California, had already passed much more stringent building codes related to fire proofing, but that it only applies to new buildings. So we have a big issue about retrofitting existing buildings with appropriate fire hardening technology, just as we have a big issue with retrofitting our buildings to decarbonize them. Thank you.
Who was that speaking? Try again.
Kimmy, is your hand raised?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think also what I wanted to say also kind of echoes what Fred was saying. I think all of us here in this room, care about climate and recognize that every human's life on Earth is like equal to ours, regardless of what country they're in. And people, in the global South especially, are less responsible and going to be impacted more by climate change. But hearing you refer to Americans as climate refugees, which is what they are now in Los Angeles, really puts into perspective that it's not just people far away that we can't relate to, like that the average American it doesn't relate to is someone in Africa as climate refugees, but no, like our fellow family and friends and fellow Americans are climate refugees at this point. And so I hope that we can bring that into our conversations with people. who might not be able to empathize with people on the other side of the world, but like that this is happening now. So I appreciate you saying the words climate refugees.
Tens of thousands in 1 week. In 1 week. Amazing. Yikes. All right. So here we are. We all came on to a call about the national picture, and we are all part of one country here that's about to go through its own crazy conniptions, contortions, distortions. And I wish everyone the best as we hold on for the ride. And I do invite anyone to come forth to any of us on the MCAN board. That's myself, Mary, Phil. Send us a note anytime with any thoughts. I do wonder, I'm wondering out loud. Oh, and Jerry's here. And who else did I miss mentioning?
Janet was on a moment ago.
Okay.
And
And
Richard.
And Richard's on? Okay, cool. So I just want to say that going forward, we got 4 years of potential inanity. And what is the right way for climate activists to participate, respond, engage? You know, I don't presume that any of us have an answer. It is awesome to hear from Steve that he and his 82 staff people are in it, ready, strategizing. They'll hit the ground running. I asked him that softball that he didn't respond to, but I could tell stories about what they went, the battles they went at in Trump 1.0, and it was tough. And they, if they didn't get the battle won during those 4 years, they did in the days and weeks after. So I guess that's optimism. All right. Any other comments, folks? Thanks for being here, and it's awesome to be amongst climate activists who are working, coming forward today, but also presume working in your communities. So thanks for all your good work. Mary, do you have any final words? Phil?
No, just we'll be sending out the slides and the recording after the Zoom for those who were not able to attend.
Just wonder if we can set a group of strategists, of the people who had some really thorough and overarching ideas, and people who haven't said anything today, to begin to get responses from attendees of how MCAN can follow up with this presentation and the whole idea of the nation and being one nation.
All right. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Phil, for all the work behind the scenes. Really appreciate it. And again, thanks to the co-sponsors today, and thank you all for being here and for being engaged. All right. I'll call it a meeting and go get lunch. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.